Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Hey, is that, yeah, it's you. Oh my God. Hey, welcome to the episode of Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. With me today is Rabbi Alex Kress. Alex, how are you today?
I'm great.
Amazing. Alex, we're going to learn a lot about you in a second. We're learning all about this concept of radical amazement, which I never heard of until you brought it up to me. I'm really excited to learn about it. But before we begin, we have the 4-minute Bad Jew Challenge, the rite of entry onto the podcast, where you tell your life story in 4 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
I love it. Yalla.
So I was born into an interfaith home in suburban Philadelphia in Abington, Pennsylvania. And my mom was not Jewish. She was raised Christian, celebrating Christmas and Easter. And my dad was Jewish. He was the son of first-generation Americans, his family from Eastern Europe. And we, from an early age, and me and my sister ended up at a Jewish preschool and kind of learning Judaism alongside my mom, which in retrospect now as a Jewish educator was pretty cool. Eventually, my mom decided to take a Judaism 101 class and learn kind of at an adult level instead of a preschool level. and she decided that conversion was a path that was interesting to her, and she pursued that. And right before my bar mitzvah, my mom ended up converting. And around that same time, there was a lot going on. We got a new rabbi at our Reform synagogue, a young guy who brought a lot of energy. He was not your typical rabbi, like rapping Ice Ice Baby from the Bima. And he brought this camp culture with him. He was a camp guy, and he brought all of us up to camp with him. My mom decided to be a nurse up at camp. My sister and I went, and we were completely fish out of water. It was not a setting that we were yet comfortable with, but ultimately it would transform our lives. We loved the Judaism we found there. We loved the vulnerability we found there. We loved that time away from our normal lives in a little oasis. And it was incredibly meaningful. And I can look back now and say it directed me towards the rabbinate, but at the time it was just a safe place for kids to grow up, and it was really meaningful. I ended up, because of camp, getting involved in Reform Youth Group and Nifty and my synagogue. And then I ended up in Israel on a teen tour through camp and then a semester in high school. And during that semester, which was very cool, called EIE, I think it's called Heller High now, we were on kibbutz Suba. So we were like living in a kibbutz in the hills of Jerusalem. And I realized how little I knew. Like, I was very involved in Jewish life, but I didn't know too much. And it lit a fire under me. And I just became so interested in Jewish history and Hebrew and finding meaning in all of this rich culture that I inherited, that I was lucky to inherit. When I got finished with high school, I ended up at Temple University. I thought I knew what I wanted to do. I applied to get an MBA in 5 years and do business, and that was interesting to me. But as soon as I got to campus, I didn't want to do that anymore. I thought I might be pre-med and go be a neurologist because I had horrible migraines, thought I'd help people that way. But nothing really felt like it fit. And even the Jewish spaces on campus, Hillel and Chabad, didn't feel like they fit, even though the Chabad rabbi is a total mensch, Baruch Cantor. I think he's still there. He's amazing. And so I ended up studying abroad pretty early, and I went to Jerusalem. I went back to Jerusalem and studied at Hebrew U, and I found that I love studying everything Jewish. And when I came back from that experience, I pivoted towards rabbinical school, which my rabbi told me I should do, but I thought he was crazy at the time. And the Jewish Studies department became what I was looking for. I just loved it. And I ended up at Hebrew Union College after I graduated from Temple, which is the Reform Seminary. I went to Jerusalem for another year. I then came back for Cincinnati for a year and then ended up on the Los Angeles campus. It was a wonderful experience. I was ordained in 2017. My first pulpit was on Long Island, which was a very unique experience, a very positive experience. I had a great mentor there. But after a couple of years, I ended up coming back to LA, to UCLA Hillel. That was an interesting experience, challenging in the same ways that I was challenged by Hillel in college. And then I landed in my current job at Best Shir Shalom, and that's been 7 years now, and it's been a fascinating journey. And also during those 7 years, I've had 2 kids, I've had 2 rounds of cancer, I've gone through a divorce. I've gone through a significant job change, and all that good and all that hardship really puts life in perspective and has made me a much more grounded and grateful person. And I think it's very much tied into what we're talking about today with radical amazement and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and just having a perspective of life that doesn't take anything for granted and appreciates what we have. So hopefully that's a good 4 minutes. I don't know if I went over, but it'll transition us into radical amazement.
Absolutely will. And there was a little bit of a spillover, just totally transparently, but like you still did a great job, and you highlighted some really good points. I really love your Jewish journey. I love what you're doing with it. I also think it's amazing that you survived so much and undergone so many different changes in your life that I'm very inspired by that. And so I think that's really amazing and remarkable. And thank God you're here, and thank God you're alive. Seriously. So,
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah. So let's deep into that. Let's dig deep into the idea of thank God you're alive, right? I feel like radical amazement, you might experience something like that, but the phrase radical amazement, that combination of words together, I'm just fascinated by it. You seem to really know a lot about it. Let's dive into it. What does that mean exactly?
So radical amazement is part of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's theology. And it is a fancy way, a way that I really connect to, and it sounds like you connect to also, of saying wonder and awe and being radically amazed by the world around us. And so many of us are completely numb to the amazing things all around us at all times, right? That there's so many amazing things happening, and we're just in our routine. We're in a groove, and as we go through that groove, we're not taking a moment to appreciate all the amazing things around us. And Rabbi Heschel teaches, and this is, decades ago. He died in 72, so we're talking about a long time ago, that as civilization advances, that our wonder declines. And there's all kinds of distractions and materialism, even in his day, and we're missing the everyday holiness, the everyday sacredness. And so he teaches that radical amazement is this ability to connect to the world around us, to connect to the divinely created world that is full of holiness, but it's actually quite countercultural to do that. It's much more normal for us to just go through the motions, not recognize everything around us. And I just deeply relate to that as a person who easily gets into grooves and easily gets into routine and likes things the easy way, that it actually takes more effort to take a moment to appreciate what's around us. Personally, I'm a slave to efficiency. So taking a beat to appreciate or offer a blessing or just have a moment of gratitude is not in my DNA. And I actually have to work towards it. And I think that's what makes it so hard for so many of us that love the idea, but struggle sometimes to put it into practice.
I get that completely to a certain extent. That's a funny statement to make, but you know what I'm saying. You're saying there's a lot happening around us right now. Like, for example, I'm just in my WeWork office here, right? And people come into work every single day in a very structured lifestyle, right? They wake up at a certain time, they get to work by a certain time, they take lunch at a certain time, they get back to work at a certain time, they clock out at a certain time, they get home and drive through traffic at a certain time, they get home, say hi to their family at a certain time, then they go to bed at a certain time, right? So it's all this time-based stuff. And you mentioned the groove that you could very easily get into. I guess I just don't see between all these glass walls and some of the decorations I have here in my office, even in your office, right? You have all these nice decorations and you have all these amazing books and furniture behind you. That's beautiful. But I don't understand what is actually happening then around us, if not just what we see every single day.
That is an interesting question, right? Like, what are the little things that we don't appreciate or take a moment? So I'll give you one example from my everyday life. If I'm walking somewhere, I'm often walking around Santa Monica to a meeting or to grab coffee or something, and I often look down. Sometimes I'm looking at my phone, I'm looking at my feet, making sure I don't trip. And I am not engaging in the world around me. I'm not looking up at the clouds in the sky. I'm not feeling the sun on my face. I'm not appreciating the fact that my body's working and I can walk. I'm just absorbed by stuff that doesn't really matter. It's less important, right? And Rabbi Heschel has this thing that he teaches that many of us approach the world with reason. And I totally believe that. That's how I've always approached the world, especially as a Reformed Jew and a Reformed rabbi. Reason is what I bring, or what I thought I always brought. But he teaches that reason means that we are trying to adapt the world to our concepts. It's very straightforward. It's sometimes putting a circle in a peg in a, whatever that phrase is. Square in a round hole. There you go.
It's a hard discussion.
But the other way that he encourages us to think about is to approach the world through wonder. And that means adapting our minds to the world around us. And he has this phrase that I'm going to share that I just love so much, that it's a state of mind where we do not look at reality through the lattice work of our memorized knowledge, right? We don't look at reality through the lattice work of our memorized knowledge. Right? We free ourselves from the confines that we're putting on the world around us, and we just experience it. We just experience the sun for a minute without thinking about the science we learned in 7th grade about how the sun works, or that we need to put sunscreen on because we are about to get burned, right? It's experiencing the magic that is we're alive. We're not just alive, we can feel the warmth of this thing in our sky that's so far away. And again, I'm talking and advocating for something that Rabbi Heschel teaches, but I have not mastered this. I'm not even close. It takes a lot of personal discipline to take that beat every time you're experiencing something or in the middle of your routine to appreciate what we're going through. And I think Rabbi Heschel also teaches that to be spiritual is to kind of let go of some of that inherited knowledge and to just experience it without thinking so much, if that makes sense. And it's hard, is what I would say. It's really hard. And I think Judaism, for me at least, is a model, a framework that helps us get there, get to that appreciation, get to that ability to just experience for a minute without putting all of our thoughts and concepts and frameworks on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Fascinating. Okay. So yeah, I think that when you put extra thought and extra mindfulness into something, that it will have a profound impact on your daily life experience. I can definitely see that. I can definitely embrace that idea, and I love that. So that's a practical step to it. On the deeper level, though, what does that have to do with Judaism and Torah? Because it seems like anything anyone can do. I think radical amazement is like anything Jewish related is something that anyone else can do. But I guess, like, how does that even relate to us as a people?
Yeah, you're right. It has a universal flavor to it. And I think that's what is so powerful about Rabbi Heschel. Many Jews know Rabbi Heschel from his work in the civil rights with Martin Luther King Jr. and marching with Torahs and marching arm in arm. And that's the primary place that a lot of us know him from. But his theology is much more about us finding God in our world and having a relationship with the divine in our world. And that's really where it grounds Jews into Judaism, is this ability, when we pause for a minute, to find gratitude and holiness around us. So just one kind of example of that, not that Rabbi Heschel teaches us, but our tradition has us doing things that express gratitude to God, right? So every time we wake up, we're supposed to say mundane. We're supposed to say this prayer of gratitude for our soul being restored. You know, like we were asleep, we were kind of dead in the ancient world, and all of a sudden our soul was restored in the morning, and that's a great blessing just to wake up. How many Jews aren't even doing that? We wake up and we're like, oh, again, it's the alarm's so early. I'm so tired. I don't want to go to work. But Judaism instead says, hey, get rid of that. Just be grateful that you have another day on this earth. Like that's powerful. And then we have this, if you're a person that prays frequently or regularly, whether that's every day or some other frequency of your choice, we have this whole section of prayer called Birkot HaShachar, these morning prayers in which we are supposed to express gratitude for our body working, for we say Elohai Neshama, about our soul, about the pure soul we have. We say Nisim B'chol Yom, these daily miracles of all the things we take for granted in life, like having land to stand on, right? Or, one that's particularly powerful these days is God who frees the captive. And we've been saying this for months and months and months. And we're like, yes, it is. I do feel lucky to not be a captive. And also I pray for these other, these captives in Gaza. And part of it is also Ashrenu, just saying, we have enough to be happy. Like, I'm so blessed. I have amazing circumstances. And yes, we're trained by social media and our friends and the and capitalism to want and want and want and buy and buy and buy. But this is a countercultural thing that says you have enough. And why don't you just recognize what you have, that, you have food to eat and shelter and, clothes on your back and friends and people that love you and a community. And I think that all boils down to this idea of Rabbi Heschel's. I'm going to share a quote from Rabbi Shai Held, who's a really amazing thinker at Hadar in New York. And he has this amazing book about Rabbi Heschel. And he says that Rabbi Heschel tries to move us, to stir us, to reorient us in fundamental ways so that our conventional egoistic ways of thinking and feeling and acting can be replaced with something radically different, an approach to the world in which God is the hub and the radial point of our lives. So I think if I were to, not to assume for everybody, but for many of us, and this is certainly the case for me personally, God was always a thing that I occasionally tapped into, right? If I went to Shabbat services or if I said Kiddush on a Friday night, God was like a thing I chose to tap into. But with what Rabbi Shai Held is saying, that Rabbi Heschel is teaching, is that if we try to make God the center place in which we offer out experience and love and gratitude, and we can orient our lives in that way, all of a sudden we have this radically different approach to the world around us, to the people around us, to waking up in the morning, to the tree we just walked past, to the sun in the sky. And it is incredibly grounding, I think, in a way that makes life more meaningful and fulfilling.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like from everything that you just described, you're talking from personal experience. You said you survived cancer. How many times now?
Twice. Yeah, the same kind of cancer twice.
Before you were diagnosed the first time, and again, thank God that you're alive. Before you were diagnosed the first time, would you say you had a good sense of radical amazement?
I would say I really like the idea.
So why does a near-death experience like that change you? Like why does that suddenly have a different kind of impact in your life?
Yeah, just to be transparent, I always had a good prognosis. I had testicular cancer, common in young men. I certainly didn't expect to have it a second time. I had 4 surgeries in a couple years that were very invasive, but I was never particularly scared of death the way some other much more aggressive cancers inspire fear. But even with a good prognosis, those moments where you're in the, going under for surgery multiple times, they can't get it. You realize that medicine really is a practice and not a perfect science. Like, they are doing their best, but it's not assured, right? The outcomes. And I think when you go through something like that, your priorities change. You're like, why was I spending so much time worrying about X, Y, and Z? Why wasn't I appreciating life? Why wasn't I getting to the beach? I love the beach. It's right there. Why don't I go? And, it's again, because I think we get in these grooves, and even in a groove, if this is your discipline and God is the radial some kind of divine understanding or universal spirit is your radial center, you're still appreciating things in a way that you don't when you just kind of have your head down and you're going through the motions. And for me, that experience of all the stuff I've experienced over the past few years, being at my lowest low and being at my, and also experiencing some really amazing highs, have helped ground me in a practice that doesn't take things for granted. My daughter is not sleeping right now. It is driving me insane. I can't even tell you how insane it's driving me. And also, as she's driving me insane, I also have these moments where I say, but she wants me. She wants to cuddle. She wants a hug. She wants a kiss right now. And I know that that's actually fleeting, right? That there's going to come a time in the very near future where she's like, do not touch me. I don't want to talk to you. I don't even want to be around you. And so when you have this perspective of kind of experiencing whatever's happening and feeling the experience and acknowledging it helps you find meaning even in the struggle. And that was certainly the case for cancer, but it's also the case for something much smaller, like my daughter's not sleeping and waking me up in the middle of the night and driving me insane. So I think we all have those big that range of experience. And it's easy to say, I had cancer, it was revelatory. It's much harder to say my daughter's driving me insane, it's revelatory. And I'm, trying to find I think all of us need to work on that daily type of, whether it's frustration or high or low or, whatever it is that we're experiencing on the daily. That's the thing where we have to put effort into saying, where is God in this moment? Where is God in the moment? Waking up at 6:30 in the morning after my daughter kept me up all night and saying modani, like that's hard for me, right? But maybe it would help to some extent.
No, I think that's really fascinating. I think that's really sweet, and I love that kind of like just embracing the moments that you have while they're precious. And not everyone recognizes that this very moment that they're in right now. Maybe they're in this very moment. You're either driving, listening. You're driving on the way to work, listening to this podcast right now. You might be at the gym right now, putting in some extra reps. You might be doing some chores or listening to this podcast, and somehow, hopefully, there can be some radical amazement done when you fold that laundry, when you complete that set, when you go and you make it past that past that yellow light before it turned red. Whatever it is. Maybe there's maybe there's something there. Maybe there's God in that. But I think that's special. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting that I'm kind of picking up on is that like you're associating God with everything in this lifestyle, from the most mundane to the more obvious, amazing things in life, right? Even to the frustrating parts. Are there more night and day examples of when God was a part of that experience?
Can I read you a poem that Rabbi Heschel wrote?
Sure.
I know this is an interesting way to respond to your question, but I just want to read you this poem. I think it's so fascinating.
Let's do it.
God follows me everywhere, weaves a net of glances around me, dazzles my blind back like a sun. God follows me everywhere like a forest. My lips are constantly astonished, heartfelt, mute, like a child stumbling upon an ancient shrine. God follows me everywhere like a shudder. I yearn for rest, but within me sounds the call, come, see how visions linger in the streets. I stroll about my thoughts like a mystery, down a long corridor, through the world, and sometimes high above, I see the faceless face of God. God follows me in trams, in cafes. Oh, only with the backs of my pupils can I see how mysteries arise, how visions transpire. I think that we have to look for God. You can experience anything in our life and say, I experienced God in this moment, or I didn't. Personally, I think it's a discipline that I have to practice. Sometimes I practice that by praying and being reminded, like in Birkot HaShachar that I went through, that there's so much I take for granted on a daily basis. Like the valves and openings in my chest and my heart and body are working and not closed so that I can stand. That's just an amazing thing that I absolutely take for granted. But I also think that there's non-religious moments in which we can experience God. Some people, that's at the ocean. I'm one of those people. I love the ocean. Being next to the ocean is so humbling, so calming, so perspective setting. And whether I'm with people or by myself, I could be there and say, God's not here. This has nothing to do with God. And still have a meaningful moment of perspective. But for me, I choose to think, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Adonai, how great is this world that we live in? I choose to frame it in the divine because it makes me radically amazed. It makes me feel grateful that for something that I could take for granted. I live in LA. I've lived here for a while now. I kind of take for granted that we live next to the beach. There's a lot of places that don't live this close to the beach. But every time I go now, I'm finding myself being incredibly grateful to have that, to be able, even just for a few minutes, I can go see the ocean and calm down. That's amazing. So I think ultimately, to answer your question, I definitely have had big moments. And there's actually a rabbi that I love named Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. And she has this book called Nurture the Wow. It's kind of a parenting book. And one of the things that I hold dearest from reading this book is she says you can kind of meditate while you do the dishes. You can feel the warm water under your hands. You can kind of like clean something, which is kind of cathartic in its own way. You can feel the floor under your feet. You can close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. And you can make something that is a chore into a moment that is holy, that is sacred, that is special and ritualized. And I think that's ultimately, for me, how I take this radical amazement idea and center it and create that God in the middle. And everything I do, I have the possibility, not saying I do, I definitely don't. I'm not perfect. I'm not even close. I'm absolutely working on this every day. But I have the awareness, the framework that I could put God right there. I could take a moment while I'm doing the dishes to connect with something bigger than myself. And that's ultimately, I think, where radical amazement falls for me. It's up to us to choose to see the world radically amazed, and we have to practice a lot.
It's beautiful. And I appreciate that this is an equally spiritual and practical lesson to life. I think that there's a lot of great steps here. I typically ask what are some practical steps people can do to start learning something like this. And you've provided a pretty good framework here for doing that. And I really do appreciate that. I have one more question for you, a little bit of a curveball here. And that is, how do you find radical amazement in bad situations, such as, oh, my car got totaled, or, oh, that job that I was applying for didn't accept me. As a matter of fact, they rejected me, or, oh, one of my parents just passed away, God forbid.
One of the quotes that Rabbi Heschel uses is from Job in explaining wonder and radical amazement. And in that text, God's kind of explaining to Job, like, you don't know anything. You're a little human, right? It's like God tells Job, listen, pay attention to these miracles. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations, right? And it's this moment of kind of grand perspective that zooms the reader and the Jew studying Job, or the anybody studying Job, out from the ego, the self-centeredness, to let's take a very big picture of this. And I got to tell you, every time I read it, I feel like I have not mastered that yet. I have not mastered the zoom out, in which I have not centered myself in the bad thing that's happening. The car accident or the fender bender that I got into down the street, so annoying. It drove me insane. There was no need for it to happen. And I didn't zoom out, right? You gave the car accident as an example. I didn't total my car, but I think almost every situation has something that we can focus on that's positive. If you lost somebody that you cared about, you can focus on how lucky you were to have them and what you learned from them and what the relationship meant. If you lost a car and you were able to walk out or you're still alive, that's a miracle, right? If you have an illness and it's given you perspective, even if it's terminal, you have a perspective and you have time to act on it. For me, that's how cancer was, I don't want to say a blessing, but I was able to approach it like I have a new perspective on how I want to live my life now, right? I have these 2 little kids and I want to live my life in a different way than I've been living it. I want something else for myself. And that happened, right? So there's the quote that I just read from Job uses the word hitbonen, which is a Hebrew word for contemplation, but it's also a musar practice, like an ethical practice of connecting to the world around us kind of through meditation and thoughtfulness and contemplation. And we're recording this in the month of Elul as we're heading towards the High Holy Days. And there's this sense during Elul that we have a lot of work to do for ourselves, right? We need to figure out what we want in the coming year by reflecting on how the past year was for us, what we want to change, where we failed, how we can do better for ourselves. And this quote, pay attention, basically. Hey, Job, pay attention and check out all the marvels around you, all the niflaot around you, all these wonderful things is, to me, one of the primary practices of Elul. Yes, I want to change. I failed in a million new ways this past year, and I want to do better in the year. And also, I can ground myself in being human and having a normal human experience of failure and success and just living by surrounding myself with a perspective that says everything's amazing, everything is awesome, and I'm going to choose this coming year to appreciate it, whether that's in a gratitude journal or whether that's saying mundane when you wake up in the morning, or whether that's simply just taking a beat while you're doing dishes to say, this is a good thing that happened to me today.
Wow. Well, Alex, I think you've given everyone here a lot to work on and chew on, a lot of practical steps people can start today with the idea of radical amazement to carry out in their life. Should someone listening to this podcast want to further ask you questions and explore what radical amazement is, learn about this meditation that you just described, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can check out my website, which has ways to get in touch with me, or just simply you can email rabbi@alexkress.com.
Amazing. Alex, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable. Thank you for all the practical and spiritual steps that you've given us to carry out our lives in a much more amazing, radical way. And to the listeners, we'll see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Bad Jew.
Shalom.